Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first expert webinar. My name is Chris Cardone. I'm the lead of customer success and education here at Unstack. And to further introduce our whole entire series around the expert webinar and further educating all the Unstackers and beyond, I want to hand off the floor to Grant Deacon, our CEO and co-founder here at Unstack.
Thanks, Chris. I was just trying to turn my video on. I think you need to maybe enable it on our end. So if I can get video, I'll wave hello to everybody. But while you work on that, yes. So thanks, Chris. And also I want to say thanks, Chris, because you've been really spearheading these webinars, getting them going, and we're really excited about them. This is our first sort of expert webinar, and so this is new. Our goal here is to really bring in outside experts to cover really essential topics that are going to help entrepreneurs and founders and marketers, really continue to grow their business. As a company, Unstack is really here to, our mission is to really help and support entrepreneurs and help you grow as fast as possible. We spend most of our time doing that through building software to help you build, measure, and scale your digital presence. But just as important is really having the tools and the strategies alongside that and the education. And so this is really one of the areas that we're focused on. To do that, we have a great speaker today, Toni O'Berry, that I'm going to introduce now. Just a couple quick sort of housekeeping items. If you're new to Zoom or just not that familiar with it, at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A section. That is where, if you have questions along the way, please add them there. You can upvote questions that you're interested in hearing the answer to. Chris and I, towards the end, will kind of proctor a Q&A session with the last 10 or 15 minutes or so. So we'll try to hold questions to the end and kind of look at, some of the most upvoted questions. So make sure you get that in there. And again, use the Q&A, don't use the chat. It'll be easier for us to manage. And if you can't figure that out, you can always post something in the chat and Chris will point you in the right direction. So I'm really excited to introduce Toni O'Berry. Toni is the founder of O'Berry Creative. She's spent her career really helping brands think about their positioning, their differentiation, how to stand out in crowded markets. And she's going to today really focus on helping to give everybody on this call some of those tools and frameworks to carry into their own business. So whether you've never thought about positioning before, or you have, but maybe you need a refresher, or it's been a while, this webinar is going to be really, really helpful for going through that. Toni has worked with brands like It Cosmetics, which is a startup that ended up being acquired for over $1 billion by L'Oreal, Williams-Sonoma, Fidelity, and a lot of other startups as well. So I'm very excited to turn it over to her. Toni, welcome to the webinar, and I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris and Grant. I really appreciate the opportunity. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. The presentation obviously is titled Extinction or Distinction, but really what we're getting down to the details of is discovering your competitive advantage. Over the next hour, 45 minutes, we'll be going over a couple of things like your brand anatomy basics for those of you who need that. The power of positioning we'll touch upon very briefly. I'm not going to go into it in great detail. It would be way too long for our presentation. But basically what it means to be distinct, and then I'll start giving you some tools that I use in ways that I assess the competition and where you can discover any opportunities, and then things to possibly rethink your offer and how it is positioned or how you're presenting yourself in the marketplace. With everything that's going on in the world right now, I think this is a good time to rethink your brand and your presence in the marketplace, and to just kind of refresh your offer. Is a perfect opportunity, I think. Let me get going here. So what's really interesting about distinction or extinction, it's not for the, for privileged businesses or larger businesses. You can be distinct regardless of your size, your budget, what industry you're in, or how old your brand is. I've really come to understand just over the years of going through these practices that any business and any product can be distinct. Sometimes it's a little difficult when you take a look at the market and you've been analyzing your competitors. You think everybody's the same and there is no room, but I think that there are. One of the questions I think you might have is, well, why is it important to be distinct? And one of the reasons it's important is because your customers are really looking for a reason to choose you, especially in those saturated markets. And I often think about like buying a refrigerator or buying appliances or buying televisions. And consumers have to really work hard to figure out which one is right for them, you know, and almost, I'm a spreadsheet person, so I'll pull out Excel and start, you know, taking a look at the size of the monitor or the capabilities that it has. And that can be really difficult. And so us as marketers and us as business owners can help it make that process easier. And some of these tools will help you think about that. The other reason that it's important to be distinct is that being on par with your competition really forces you, unfortunately, to start to compete on price and features, which ultimately, I mean, it's a tiring game, and ultimately it can lead to the, you know, the bottom, so that you're becoming the low cost provider, which is really where you don't want to be. So the more we can move beyond that, the better. So the tools and techniques I'm about to share with you are just a few examples of how you can start thinking differently about your brand. But before we dive in, I'm just going to take a little quick moment to really take a look at a very high level of what the anatomy of a brand is and what goes into a brand. So clearly your brand is, you know, what your customers see on the surface. But really the elements that go into it, and some people may have this, these already created as far as their business strategy, but these really define who your brand is, how it's unique to your organization. And those consist of, you know, the purpose, which is why you exist, your mission and your vision, which is what do you want to accomplish and what do you hope to achieve long term. The last two elements that I wanted to also bring into this, which is really what this presentation is about, is positioning and your creative strategy. And these are really where distinction plays an important role. So positioning articulates specifically what you have to offer and to whom, and really critical is, and why are you unique and why are you different than everybody else? I am really oversimplifying positioning and positioning statements, but I really, like I'd mentioned, don't really want to go into the details of that for this presentation. So just a takeaway of positioning is that you are really embracing who you are and what you have unique, in addition to finding what is competitive about your brand. Creative strategy, on the other hand, moves that even more forward into the surface, which is how are you going to come to market? What are you going to say about your brand? How do you say it? Which is a little bit of the voice and the tone, and the vernacular and the words that you're going to be using. Also the visuals. What are you going to look like, and how are you going to make people feel? So these are kind of the two little gem areas that really can help you stand out in the marketplace. If you don't have a business strategy, or if you don't have brand positioning or even a creative strategy, don't worry. These tools can still help you. And I think it's really valuable to at least be thinking this broadly. So today we will be focused on positioning and creative strategy. So how do you become distinct? Yeah. One of the first things you can do is really moving beyond those common claims. People start to talk about, and a lot of the markets that I analyze, you inevitably will see that a majority, time and time again, regardless of what industry we're in, we'll see a large bulk of the players in that industry repeating the same things. They'll talk about the fast and the easy, the high quality, the durability, the safety. All of those features start to establish what we call market parity or sameness, so that everybody is starting to look and sound and feel the same. To gain more visibility, you have three options, and one of them is experience. So how can you control that experience or create a different experience, different than, apart from the competitors? Things like having a responsive customer service, or the net impression and the character and style are completely different or unique. Even having meaningful and relevant advertising. So I think these are starting to become like very low-hanging opportunities. When we start getting into point of view, these have become a little bit more complex. As you move farther upstream, you move into more defensible and unique positions, but they're also become a little bit more challenging. So a point of view like shared values and social or corporate responsibility, transparency into your organization or transparency into a market, even your belief system, that ties back into the foundation of your organization. So that's a little bit more methodical, takes a little bit more to change. As we move even further away, the breakaway innovations or distinctions are really product innovations, or even service, or even if it's a software online, it can approach things differently with unique code, anything that can be trademarked. Reinventing a marketplace, combining markets, thinking differently about how you're positioning your product in the market can also be a breakaway distinction. Some of the examples that I wanted to show as well, this is an example of an experience. And in this case, this is, we've all come to expect less than ideal travel conditions from airline industries. Overall, I think that's kind of a generalized feeling in a sense that I think that we still maintain today, but JetBlue has actually broken out of that and they actually saw that as an opportunity to live by the mantra, never let a good crisis go to waste. So they actually acknowledge the fact that there's this bad reputation around airlines and the service that go with it. But they've actually decided that, hey, we're gonna take that as an opportunity. We're gonna start treating people differently to stand out. So how do they do it? They surprise and delight their customers at the individual level, which is kind of the micro level, as well as the macro level. So they will, be the surprising people that during critical times come in and save the day. And that alone helps them stand out. And those behaviors that they have embedded in their organization will go a long way and will spread and will be pretty permanent as far as a brand impression that they're leaving. An example of a point of view would be social responsibility. So, another shoe would be, kind of a ho-hum, but, Tom's had a different idea that really a lot of people could embrace, which was providing a pair of shoes to a child in need with every purchase would get some people's attention. And actually it gets a lot of people's attention because not only do they do that, but they continue to stay relevant by delivering fashionable brands. They don't just limit it to a very basic shoe. They've really grown and kind of evolved as the market has evolved. And they constantly are delivering on their brand promise. They haven't let up on that. So this is a great point of view based on social responsibility. And this is deeply embedded within their organization again. Another invention is the breakaway, another way of getting distinction. And this is reinvention. And quite honestly, who does need a new mop? And in this case, Swifter really did believe that there was room for improvement. And they've also been able to extend that product line into many, many other products that make our lives easier, basically. So now that I've shown you a little bit of that continuum, going from extinction to distinction, mentioning features and benefits, experiences, point of view, and breakaway, the question, I guess, would beg, where do you begin? And I think that really is individual and it depends on where you are and the time you have. But some of the first tools you can use is really start by investigating. The first thing we want to do is really define that market parity for whatever market you're in. Identify and avoid the overused and the obvious. Be clever and find those hidden opportunities to be distinct. And I think one thing that I don't want to lose sight of, I think it's really important to always remember to be true to your brand. Don't just change to be different. You want to make sure that it is tied into who you are as an organization and your belief systems. Again, going back to your mission and your purpose and your vision. If you are just changing to be different, it won't be sustainable and it won't be believable because you're not delivering it all the way through your organization. Every time that I begin a new branding project, the exercises that I'm going to walk you through to help you just start thinking differently about your brand and your market are exercises that I go through. They're quick and they're just the level of information I need to point me in the right direction. So the first step is to define parity in your market. Figuring out, what are the words right now that we're just using features and benefits, fast and easy to use. But one tool that I've used, and I use it extensively, is this overview, this to identify parity, you know, in the very broad sense. So what I usually do is pull together information, usually from their website, just because it's the most readily available information. And I'll include at times my own or my client's website at the same time, so I can keep that also within my market assessment. But what I start doing is rating their the first impressions that I have. Can I easily navigate their site? Do they have a unique look? Do they have a simple and immediate message? Sometimes I'll even go a little bit deeper into what is their customer service like? Again, kind of moving beyond the website, but actually going into that customer experience. If I'm really, really curious oftentimes. So I'll go down a lot of rabbit holes to a point where I want to experience everything. I may go through a tutorial. I may go through, you know, touching base with customer service to just kind of find out where those opportunities are. I've also, a little quick story with our work with Clarisonic in the very early ages of them coming into the marketplace. There was very little that they had in terms of research, but they were such a young startup that they didn't have the money required to go do, you know, competitive audit or even, you know, doing some primary research. So we ended up just pulling information that we could from their customers. So we looked at messaging boards, we looked at reviews, and we used, you know, blogs to cull as much information we had or that we could find about people who were using Clarisonic. And not only it was powerful, you know, information that obviously we could use as testimonials, but we took this information and we used it to help guide our brand positioning, as well as understanding the vernacular that they were using, the enthusiasm that they felt for the product. And it was there was basically a party going on that Clarisonic wasn't aware of at the time. And we were coming to the party. So we really had to kind of come in seamlessly, not change things, not change their vernacular, just kind of, you know, pick up from where this momentum was taking us and continue on. One thing I do want to mention about this is that the top portion of these are the criterias and the objectives that I have used, and those can be determined based upon what you're trying to discover. So they don't necessarily have to be these. Don't study this too deeply. Look at it from a very high level, but then the evaluation of it really kind of defines exactly, you know, where is that parity. And that's like kind of the first step that we were talking about. So once we've recognized what those features and benefits are and what that parity is, then we can move on to the experience. Experiences are usually kind of what I call the low-hanging fruit. And I think a lot of the elements that you can impact are easy to affect. And they include things like your brand appearance. From a visual standpoint, from a vernacular standpoint, these are things that they're within reach, and they're easier changes that we can make. And one of them, like I had mentioned, is first impressions. First impressions are really the immediate reactions you have based upon how you look, what you say, your style and your tone. And oftentimes we look before we even read. So this kind of focuses on the creative strategy element of your brand. In this example, I'm really focusing on a project that we worked on within the prescription management software market. And one of the things, like I'd mentioned, that you often come across is that a lot of the competition are going to be very literal. They're going to be in the area of talking about the product in very factual terms. And in this case, it was very technical. They were using more jargon, and basically they were lacking a lot of personality and style. These are great opportunities. I mean, it's not going to take a whole heck of a lot to break away from this. And in fact, a couple of the competition, even though they still tend to look a little bit alike, just reading even the headlines, or even the light bulb image starts to get them to break out a little bit. They're thinking a little bit differently about their imagery. They're thinking about some of the headlines. You can't see this, but one of the the images below the light bulb is a humorous image, and it has a very traditional headline, but their tone has a little bit more of a style that has some fun and humor to it. So even humor can help break out. So these are subtle changes, even at this point. Then another competitor, this was an interesting combination because they seem to be visually really breaking out because they're using very large images, a mother and her daughter, and it seems very just humanistic. So they're adding that to bring that to their distinction. What's very interesting, however, is that their headline is says advancing health together, which is kind of a ho-hum, you know, headline combination with their graphics. When we started positioning this company, we really brought this together. Again, this is again in the prescription management software. And our approach to this was to do it a little bit differently. And we did ask them, you know, what really is the distinction that you bring to the marketplace? And it really was simplifying what is a very complex problem, which is managing prescriptions. And in this case, we use this headline, which is also married by a graphic that says managing prescriptions is easy. We've worked hard to make it that way. So in our opinion, this was something that really stood out from the competition. In another experience, we took a look at brand messaging, and brand messaging becomes a little bit more of the details of, you know, what is the website saying, or if you have other material, well, what is the website saying about the company? What does the name say about the company? So this is a combination of different examples within the online scheduling software. We were taking a look at everybody that was playing in this space, and a lot of them we were finding, again, were in this literal quadrant, and we're really focused on their features. Some of the examples here I see that are free online scheduling, online booking for local services, booking and scheduling websites, again, very, very literal. As we start moving into more of a benefit, moving up this quadrant, then we start getting into things like mind and body, which I think is a fascinating example because it brings in a little bit of a combination of exactly who their target audience is. Mind and body is really bringing in yoga, and they focus a little bit differently on their scheduling, even though they cross out and they go into different categories beyond yoga. But it's about this connection, and their name alone is resonating with a very particular target audience. Their description or their tagline is very literal: online business management solutions. So this kind of shows you a little bit of the analysis that I'll go through. And then as I start continuing through this, moving further away from the literal and the features, I start moving into more of this figurative, or these concepts that people are wrapping around things. Free your time, schedule online by Scheduly. This one is kind of interesting. Manage your appointments like you manage your life. We hope that's a benefit. And then Life Booker, which I thought was a great example, is about time, which is a little bit of a double entendre because they're looking for a great solution and people have been waiting for it. And it is all about time because it's scheduling software. Another example that, or exercise, I should say, that I frequently do is they're called tag or word clouds, and they're really a quick tool to see what competitors are saying and how they're saying it. This is an example of what you can easily find in like healthcare and the pharmacy field. And what I usually do is I pull content from the home page. I gather as much as I can, and usually high level touch points, like I mentioned, the home page of a website, the about section, again, on the website. If you can find press releases, oftentimes that will give you really good boilerplate information on how people talk about themselves. I will do this across industries. So my pages get really, multiple pages of content that will then be dumped into a word cloud, or it can just be for one individual competitor. And a lot of times, a good place to start is with your own material, to see exactly what you're saying in a very subtle way, but repeating, you know, across all these different touch points. And again, you want to look for unique and overused words. These again are opportunities for you to speak differently in the market. You can redefine your vernacular by not only using different words, but also different tones. And again, trying to avoid jargon. I think this is a great tool. This is kind of a fun one. This is one way that you can get impact, I guess, the experience of your users to stand out again, is to play around with your color palette and take a look at where your industry is. This is actually these are the top 100 brands in the US, and it was very interesting to just take a look at where their colors would lay. And it's not just taking a look at their logo, it's in general taking a look at the primary colors that they're using in their materials. The use of color is a great opportunity to break away really simply, and I think you can see down in the far left corner where there are only about 4 different logos in this example that are really breaking out away from it. They're in this lime green color. The other ones I think that catch my attention are Google and eBay, and the ones that are NBC, that are multiple colors that really can break out. But you can see the blue is saturated, and I think you're going to find in a lot of industries, blue is saturated. A lot of people are using blues. So we've already recognized that relying on features and benefits is a race to the bottom. So we've kind of said we don't want to be there. And we've talked a little bit about experiences and what you can impact easily to alter those customer experiences. The next phase we're going to be going into is that point of view. And the point of view, like I had mentioned, is really entrenched in your company's culture, your core values, and your philosophy. It's something you really believe in strongly. If your organization does have a strong belief system, it could become your distinction and the foundation of your brand if you choose to embrace it and promote it. I think it's, as I had mentioned, it becomes a little bit harder to do this because it does need to be something that is, you know, at the foundation of your company. But it can clearly, if you decide that it's important enough and distinct enough, then your creative strategy starts coming into place, as well as your brand position, to make sure that you're talking to the right audience and you are able to share their values and you're giving them information that they feel is important. And one of the examples I have to show you is cosmedicine. And, you know, I said the point of view is really transparency, but they fell into so many different categories. It's all about truth to them. In fact, their philosophy and their tagline is "Truth is beauty." And this does this reinforced strongly their belief that every point of contact with customers needed to dispel these myths that were in the industry. So they encourage their customers to read ingredients, learn what they do, know what to ask. This is actually a copy that I pulled from their site. Cosmedicine is also dispelled, you know, beauty myths, such as when a product is truly effective, you need less of it, not more, which really goes against what the industry says in trying to push more product and obviously sell more, you know, of their their brands. You know, Cosmedicine also positioned their brand as a beauty brand with integrity, just to cut through, you know, the beauty dialogue that was going on. In fact, this campaign also translated onto their website and all of their packaging, but this is "No Beauty BS" is their campaign. And they had a series of truths, like this is truth number 23, dehydrating oily skin only makes it oilier. Or truth 28, over exfoliating can actually hurt your skin. And they did it in a creative way that had that shock value in order to get their message. So this was a great example. Another great example, in my opinion, is philosophy. And talking about doing a cloud tag, you know, this takes a look at their vernacular, whereas I showed you before the vernacular from the prescription in the pharmacy, the healthcare industry, where it was all the same. Philosophy is using words that really break through, even in a very saturated market like the beauty industry. So they're using grace, they're using clean, they're using miracles, they're using just vernacular that really evoke a certain feeling. And they continue that, not just in their website, but in everything that they do, from purity in their product naming to take a deep breath, to miracle worker, to renewed hope, ultimate miracle worker, and then clear days ahead. This is just a sampling of how they continue this language and this vernacular throughout their whole brand. And this really does make them distinct. Now we're starting to get into probably the most defensible, but possibly the hardest, or one of the hardest, I should say, and that is really the breakaway. As I mentioned, the further upstream you move, the more defensible your product and your brand becomes, and the more unique you become. A strong point of view is also entrenched, deeply in your company, your culture, and your values. Oh, I'm sorry, breakaway. It really is. These innovations they're protected by trademarks. They are like coding, so they're difficult to replicate easily. And so the further away you get, the more defensible it is. Some of the breakaway examples I have are for Clarisonic. They really took the opportunity. When they came to us, we were trying to position them. And the obvious ones to take a look at was the beauty and the skincare market, which is this huge market at almost 9 billion. The other one was the personal health and wellness market, which was also a very huge market. If you're not familiar with what a Clarisonic is, it's a technology invented by the sonic care inventors, and it's just basically a facial cleansing brush, and it's micro movements, it's sonic related, and that alone helped us really kind of think about the positioning differently. We knew if we were going into the beauty skincare market, we were going to lose. We were a startup company, not necessarily startup, but early phase. I think they were in their second or third year. And in order for us to compete against these larger beauty brands, it was a little bit of a losing proposition, because we wouldn't have the dollars, the deep pockets, in order to compete with them with the full page ads that they had. And anyway, we knew that at the core of the product, it was innovative. We knew it was something that was more effective. So we, through the discussions of just working with them, we really defined, this area that we needed to carve out. And that was something that that Clarisonic built out over time, including not just their devices in this area for cleansing skin, but they've expanded their device market into other areas of facial beauty and facial cleansing, in addition to adding products that work the best with the sonic technology that goes with them. That's one opportunity. Kind of sticking with the skincare market, because I went really deep into it. You can reposition, and that can be a breakaway. So when the skincare market is as large as we were talking about, 9 billion or even 11, whatever, the larger the market, the harder it is for you to compete, and you will get very, very lost, because you need to have a very broad position in order to appeal to a very large audience. And that dilution of your brand is very difficult to market. It's very difficult to get noticed. You can't get the shelf space. You can't compete against keywords when you're thinking about SEO, because they're already bought up by the larger brands. So it's kind of a losing proposition to go into those larger ones. What is easier is if you can carve out a niche. If there's something within your product that is unique and there are others like it, then that helps you compete within something that is a little bit more manageable. Kind of sticking with the cosmedicine opportunity, this was really in the clinical aspect of it. So I broke out the market into beauty, which are the big beauty brands. Clinical was another category, apothecary, which you see philosophies in that category. And then there were the trendy ones.
And Tony, I would say just, you know, for startups and smaller companies especially, you know, one of the things that you always hear is, you know, do one thing really well, or who's your sort of target market or sort of go to market, you know, persona that you're going after. So I think this is a really good just thing for people to take a second to really think about, you know, if you're, you know, in a really big category, what's a subset of that category that you can really do quite well in, versus trying to do it all really well, which is, you know, hard for anybody, but especially hard for these, you know, for startup companies like most of us on this call who have limited resources and you don't have that, you know, share of mind and share of wallet already.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a really good point. And I see time and time again, smaller companies or startup companies that haven't quite embraced that yet. And I think it can be a relief once you really realize that, you know, you may not have to, you know, go get that full page ad. You can actually find a different way. Maybe it's a classified ad in the Wall Street Journal. I mean, there are so many different ways of approaching this. And I think what's really important, it kind of goes back to the brand iceberg at the very beginning of the presentation. Even though we're not talking about positioning, some of the elements within defining your positioning in the market, including your positioning statement, is really identifying who your customers are based upon the product that you are offering. And if you can get that right, then you just need to follow the breadcrumbs to where your customers are at. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Doing less is more in many cases. And in fact, it goes right into my last slide, which is narrowing your scope, which you were just talking about. When we were working with a pharmacy management software, they did start very broadly at the bottom of the pyramid. They're, you know, empowering healthcare and advancing healthcare. Those are huge, big statements to make, let alone how big the audience is and the competition. So we started moving them up the pyramid a little bit more into really what it is that they're doing. So they're not just empowering healthcare or advancing healthcare, they're actually automating healthcare within the pharmacy services. And then we kept, you know, honing it even tighter and tighter and tighter up until, you know, getting to that point of just being pharmacy management software. It sounds really simple and easy to get to that point. Sometimes it can be very difficult because your offer can do so much, and or you know where it could expand and you want to capture that market. Back to Grant's point, if you can focus, it focuses your dollar, it focuses your efforts, it focuses everything. And then at one point, if it makes sense, then you can start branching out and adding more and evolving, which I think things do all the time. So this is kind of where we started. I just wanted to leave, you know, the spectrum up there so you can take a look at it. Again, this is just kind of a guide, but, you know, extinction through distinction, you know, wherever you can move up a continuum from features and benefits is going to benefit you. And just going through some of those exercises, and that's not the end all be all. There are so many tools that you can use that I'm not even, you know, thinking about in specific markets that could be really helpful. And I just want to stress that in addition to taking a look at your competition, don't forget who you are as a brand, because you don't want to be somebody you can't deliver on it. And it can be really exhausting. And I think with that, we open it up to some Q&A.
Awesome. So I'll hop in here, and just quick reminder to everybody attending, feel free to drop anything in the Q&A so we can look at it. And to all the panelists, you should have video ability now if you want to share with the audience. But to actually begin us, we have Nancy, who her first question is, can you show us some examples of digital product branding?
Would you repeat that again?
If you could kind of show, or just for the case of time, give an example of like product branding for the digital space. So like, I think she means software or technology.
Yeah, so let's see, from a technology standpoint, so I'm assuming you're an example that we have worked on. Yes, we have helped, what's I want to say, a marketing automation software within the digital space. We did their positioning, and I don't have the example in front of me, but when we went through their positioning statement, it was again fairly general, but when we started fleshing it out even further, we realized that yes, they were talking to, so this is in the B2B space. It's for a company called Elixir, and they were recently purchased. I would say recently, in the past 5 years. But their positioning statement was very general. And this is kind of getting into a different presentation about how to build out your positioning statement and what goes into it. But when we were defining some of the elements, and we follow Jeffrey Moore's model, which is crossing the chasm, when we start really defining who an audience is, we challenge people to move beyond a demographic statement. So it's not just marketers who are looking for automated marketing systems. We actually push them a little bit deeper to really figure out, well, what's their point of pain? So I guess always looking at things beyond just the high level. So the final statement that we came back with, and I don't have it right in front of me, was something along the lines of, for marketing professionals who are limited in their time and need to have a quick solution, Elixir is that solution. And I apologize for not having it with me right in front of me, but that would be one example. And we really did take a look at the space and all of the exercises that we went through. And I apologize, I should have included that in here. It would have been really helpful. But I hope that answers your question.
Toni, I think a couple other like quick reference examples that we could toss out. Actually, I think one could even be Unstack. I posted something in the Facebook community last night. You know, we've been kind of putting some positioning around, you know, the fast and easy way to, you know, build digital content. You know, again, that's very literal. Another one we did was, you know, the platform for agile marketing teams. Again, like, okay, that sounds cool, but like, what is that? And then we tested that versus, hey, digital marketing doesn't have to be so painful. And that is actually performing at 150% better in terms of people who are clicking through and engaging, you know, and going deeper into the buying process. So that's a very tangible recent example I can share, you know, where we're focusing on, you know, the pain, not the feature. And so maybe, Nancy, that could be like an analog for your business, is sort of not necessarily like the deliverable or the service, but like the pain that you're solving for. I think another company in digital that's done really well with this is Drift. They're a Boston-based company. There were a lot of chat-based, you know, solutions in the market, like Intercom and, you know, live chat, and there were a lot. Olark, you know, that's been around for a long time, but they really came in and approached it in a totally different way. They kind of used the positioning. I think it was like, you know, the product for, you know, the product for now, or like the now, you know, the product for like generation now, something along those lines. Somebody can look it up and maybe correct me if I'm wrong on that, but they did that. And then they also really personified their own employees to live the values of the Drift brand. And I actually think that's a really good segue into another question that somebody asked, which are, you know, what are some of the ways to incorporate fans that are offering, you know, free services, or what are a way to sort of incorporate your net promoters or thinking about community and getting your customers or your fans, your community to like propagate your brand story and kind of share in those values. So I think that's a really interesting one, Toni. I don't know if you can speak to that or if you've seen that in some of your clients.
That's a good one. Nothing is coming to mind right now. Fans are offering free services to support your purpose. I'm going to have to maybe circle back around on that one. I think it's a really good question, and nothing is so specific. I'm having a hard time coming up with an exact example that we have.
Well, one thing I've seen in the beauty space a little bit, people will create kind of closed communities for some of their like more organic influencers, where they'll like kind of bring them a little bit closer into the process, like how the sausage gets made. Maybe give them like early access to stuff. It's almost the equivalent of like almost like behind the scenes, like what's going on at the brand. I think that I'm not sure who asked the question, but I think in general, if you're using one of, you know, that third pillar, I think, of Toni's framework, which is around the experience and the values. And I think, Toni, you referenced Tom's. I think that's really a fantastic example. People want to go out and tell the story, you know, themselves. They don't even need the push. And so sometimes like, you know, people are buying the product, but they're also buying the values. And I think that's a really great sort of example to look at. There's probably also some ways to like enable that if it's happening for you naturally in the sort of communities that you have. So like push those resources out to them, let them know about things, you know, don't be afraid to ask, because I think if people are net promoters, they're willing to do that and to sort of share your message because they believe in it, you know, and I think that's the benefits of that.
I think also like,
oh, go ahead, Chris.
To echo that here at Unstack, we actually do it where a lot of our feedback and how we get product momentum is from users. And how we kind of reward that is everybody here on the onboarding team, we will tag every single conversation that relates to something. And the people who brought that feedback to us get the earliest access. They can sometimes even like see screenshots of the staging to make sure that it looks right to them. And that's kind of a way to reward with some type of offering back to those who are giving. I'm going to use like free services as feedback for your product in this case, and kind of reward them for doing that and building that momentum for your product team.
Those are great examples. And I apologize. I think that you're right about, you know, how can you bring in your fans and have them, make them feel special? And I think one of the things that both Clarisonic and It Cosmetics did, it created the It Girls. So those were the people that got the first products. They were tapped into for many reasons, not just, you know, to test products and to give feedback back, but they were also given, you know, the promotions first, you know, or maybe a slight discount. So these customer, you know, programs, I think that can reward people, they're going to create your largest advocates. And I'm sure you've all heard the fact that if you can turn, you know, a customer into a believer, then, you know, it's your marketing dollars go that much further because they are then talking about your brand for you and they're actually selling it to people. So if you have followers, you should break them out into a very specialized group, either, you know, whether it's through a separate Facebook page or a separate email list. Call it a club if you want to, if it has to be that specific, sure. Some people will sign up for that to be, you know, part of that little select group of people. So it's a very great question. Many ways of doing it.
One thing I'd add to, if for those interested in this topic in particular, we're actually going to be doing an expert session on influencer marketing, both paid and organic. We're going to be bringing on Gibran Malik, we're from Grapevine, to help kind of give you, you know, some practical tools and tips around influencer marketing in general. So if that's something that, you know, kind of some of you are interested in, I don't know if it's yet up on our webinar page. If not, it will be later today. You can register for that. So just something that's a little bit more dedicated to that topic for those that are interested. I see a couple questions on here that are somewhat related, Toni, and you know, I think this is something that I think especially owners and founders think about, which is like ROI. You know, because like we put all this time in, and you know, we're already working with shoestring budgets, and we're trying to get it all to work. Like, you know, when you're doing positioning, and whether it's not necessarily just positioning, but just thinking about even the creative and some of these tests that you were doing, maybe speaking to kind of how you and your clients thought about like evaluating success, and sort of how you guys, you know, maybe any tips for the audience and like how to, you know, kind of how to really keep tabs on that. And obviously we, you know, a little bit of a plug at Unstack, you know, we do a lot of tracking around this. So if you are testing with our content, we'll help you solve that problem out of the box, but not everybody is, and not everything happens on digital content. So I'm just curious if you had some thoughts there.
There are so many opportunities, I think, and measuring is I mean, when Unstack came to me and we were, just building our relationship, what I really found valuable was the ability to do A/B testing, because I think that's very difficult for a lot of businesses, especially if you have a small business and you have to rely on programmers. So even the ability to do something like that so easily in a plug and play manner is hands down something I haven't seen anywhere. I think the other thing that is very difficult for businesses in order to measure the effectiveness of anything is that you have so many different platforms. I try to handle, what do I try to do? I try to make sense of all this information. At the same time, integrated campaigns are number one in my world. So we'll be on social, we'll be on email, we have retail, we've got, we were even doing the SMS messaging to get people to respond differently. And especially during times like this, where some retail establishments, brick and mortar, their doors are closed. So how are we driving traffic to a couple things? Brick and mortar that doesn't have an online presence because it's difficult to compete with Amazon delivery. There are ways around that, but it's also difficult to compete with big players in those markets. In this case, it's the pet industry. So how do you compete against Chewy? You're in that racing to the bottom. So I think measuring your effectiveness from a very traditional standpoint, brick and mortar within a small town, you've got billboards, you have newspapers, those are difficult to measure. But again, online, I think you have so many opportunities. They can be across platforms, which can be challenging. And again, Unstack is beginning to solve those problems of bringing them into one location that will really help make it available for us to measure, even at the smaller business level, which I think is very difficult because a lot of the platforms are, cost prohibitive to do that, and it can be very difficult.
I'd say too, like if you're doing anything that's harder to track, like even more like very traditional, like let's say you went out and did a billboard, or even if you bought something in a magazine, just like thinking about, ultimately that at some point in every buyer's journey, almost always somebody comes through the website and makes their way there. And so if you're able to use, either dedicated URLs, to a page for promotion, if you're able to use, tracking links with UTM parameters, we have some like free resources on how to set those up, very easy to do. You can then start to see, oh wow, like actually a lot of people did come from that promotion, or or maybe they didn't, right? And you should, so it's obviously at the end of the day, it's about knowing what's working, what's not, and sort of what to do next. And so I think those are, if you kind of agree that at some point, most people will have a digital touch point, even if that's at the point of sale, having some way, coupon code, for example, like having some way of tying that back. There are a number of like low hanging kind of easy ways to do that. So I would encourage testing and trying some of those quick wins.
And somebody had talked, just to hook off of what you just said, I think landing pages are really key. I mean, there's so much value to driving people to a very particular page where you can talk about, where you can continue the discussion that you started that they clicked on. A lot of times people will take them to their homepage and then you're kind of lost. You're like, wait a minute, I just answered a question. I'm looking for something very specific and I have to hunt for it. So having a landing page to continue that customer engagement, I think is really key. I didn't go into customer engagement models, but we do follow a traditional one of, awareness, and it's broken down. It goes from awareness to all the way through purchasing, through even, customer advocacy. And at each of one of those levels in that model, we will develop programs that say, for example, awareness. They have no awareness of your brand. Well, how do we get them aware? And then what is the action? How do we get them to click, and where do we get them to click? So very particular actions and reactions in order for us to measure. That might, answer your question in a very broad sense, but it can be very methodical.
Yeah, to also back on that, we'll actually be talking about this for the influencer webinar just about in 2 weeks from now. But doing that backing of matching the content to the advertisement is really important. And I think that's where a lot of even brand specialists kind of see that fall off, is anytime you have a specific message, providing a landing page that backs it and delivers even more education about that message is always a huge key point to bank on.
And Toni, I have a question for you. You know, a lot of us are kind of thinking about like how to be cognizant of what we're putting out there and how we're telling our story, you know, in this kind of trying time of, you know, dealing with like COVID-19, and obviously a lot of people have been impacted. Do you have any advice for everyone on this webinar, just generally for people, and sort of how to, like, just maybe how to keep in mind, you know, some of what's going on around us, and you know, how to kind of how to market effectively without becoming tone deaf?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've all seen is that, you know, people are putting on their website, you know, how their organization is responding to COVID. Either, you know, they are either operational or minimally operational. So I think making sure that you are communicating very publicly on your Facebook page, on your Twitter, Instagram, wherever you are socially, make sure you cover that so that there is kind of a statement. When it comes down to selling, and I think about retail, as you know, so much of our clients are in e-com or physical retail. I think it's just making services available. Like we have a lot of companies that are providing pickup or delivery. The other thing is we also have a company that has started making masks out of their remnant material for it's kind of a gift with purchase, so that if you purchase off of their website, they're going to send you, you know, one of their, I don't know what it's called, the normal people, not the health level, not the health grade of masks, but just something to cover your face. So they're kind of doing that as an option, but they're also selling them. So if you want them, you can buy them. And it was really an important discussion with this business owner to say, you know, you want to make sure that you cover your cost and you make some profit, but we do not want to come across as profiteering. And I'll give you an example of, you know, emails that you guys may have also experienced where people are saying, hey, we're selling masks now and we're selling them for $30 a mask. And I'm like, wait a minute, I can make it on my own. You know, so that to me left a bad taste in my mouth. I think you just want to be careful. You can profit, you can sell your products. Just in business as usual products, I'm not even talking about, but I think just soften your sell. And from a positioning standpoint, similar to how we kind of opened up, you know, our presentation, is these are times that you can take advantage of repositioning or doing things that you wouldn't normally do. And I think we're starting to see that in a lot of respects across our social lives. You know, this is a great time to, you know, pick up a hobby. This is a great time but tie that back to what you offer. And is it a great time to do something that makes you look good, doesn't make you look like you're profiteering, and are actually being, you know, is more of a humanistic approach to the crisis we're in? Helpful.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I also think that if you're able to, you know, I think some companies are, like there's a company here in Boston called Love Pop, and they make cards. I don't know if you've ever gotten a Love Pop card.
I have seen those.
But
yeah,
it's a pretty cool brand. I bought a few myself. They're here in Boston, and you can buy them online. But they've completely, during this, you know, pivoted to using their equipment, you know, to making face shields, you know, grade 1 face shields for people. And so obviously that's not the business they were in, but it makes me want to buy a Love Pop card, you know, the next time, you know, I'm buying one for someone, just knowing that, you know, they were kind of living those values. So I think just an interesting case. I give them a lot of credit for that. Not everybody has that, you know, those materials lying around to do that, but, you know, we can all think of interesting ways to be helpful and sort of cognizant of the situation. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, Toni, thank you so much for, you know, coming in today, for doing this. I hope that everybody, you know, got, you know, value out of it and had an opportunity to kind of take a step back and think about, you know, where your brand's at today, where your story's at, where you want to take it, you know, and really use this as, I think, hopefully a foundation to build on. We wanted to do this one first because I think from here, some of the other sessions that we have coming up will really build on this. So really taking the story and then championing that, you know, through your content, through influencers or a community, you know, through creative like Toni talked about today. So Toni, I really thought this was great, and you know, I appreciate it. Also, if anybody here is interested, you know, we only had an hour today, but if you're interested in talking to Toni more, her information's on the slide. You can reach out to her on LinkedIn. She'd be happy to chat with you. And if you need help, you know, from me or from us or Chris, reach out to us. You know, just reply back to any of our emails. If you're in need of any help on content or getting something going on that front, obviously that's what we do, and we'd be more than happy to get you set up and help you out there and schedule some time. So just put that out there, you know, if needed. That's what I have from my end. Again, thank you everyone so much. I think this was an amazing first expert webinar. So Toni, thanks for working with us to kind of piece this together and work through the process. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And like you said, if there are any questions, please just follow up with me at my email address. That'd be perfect. It's a deep subject. It's a lot to cover in 1 hour. So yeah. Thank you for joining us.
We scratched the surface of the iceberg. And Chris, do we have any final sort of announcements or anything before we sign off?
So just one more thank you to Toni. And then we will also, for everybody who attended, you'll get a follow-up not only with a slideshow, but also with the recording of this. And that's about it.
Okay, and if you guys like this, check out our other webinars. Like we said a couple times, we've got a bunch coming up. We're scheduling more. If you have feedback or there's a topic you're particularly interested in, tweet us, let us know so we can be thinking and planning for that. But yeah, thanks everybody, and we'll see you on the next one. And thanks again, Toni.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Bye.
Be well. Bye-bye.